now that I have the M17A2 gas mask as far as I'm aware, I thought it would be a good idea to go through all of the cheek filter masks I have in my collection. Now, I don't have an XM27, which is a prototype M17 made out of silicon to be lighter weight. I don't have the XM28, which will be in this video. I don't have the Japanese Type 3, I think it's called, which is the Japanese version of an M17. And I also don't have the Chinese M65, which is the one with the massive cheek filter on one side. I also don't have a prototype PMK, which had a cheek filter on it. So this isn't a conclusive list of every cheek filter mask ever made, but there's going to be a lot in this video. And we're going to compare them one to each other to give them a score out of, I don't know if I'm going to give them a score out of 10, but regardless, what I'm going to do is put each of the masks on, you know, and speak about how comfortable it is, how good the voice diaphragms are, which you can hopefully pick up on camera, whether or not it has a drinking tube. I'm not going to talk about the quality of the drinking tubes really for this, it's just does it have one or not is going to be the thing. I think all of these masks can technically have outserts except the PBF, so whatever, let's just get into it. So first up we have what I believe is an M17A2, so let's look at the American mask, you know, the one that America made and everybody said, although that was the original M17, not the A2, but the mask that everybody else said, oh comrade, let us copy American design, it's very good, maybe. So there you go, here's M17. Right, I'm not going to fully do the straps up because this isn't a test video and sometimes these masks don't want to come off. So, from the video I did the other day, the M17's exhale valve is actually, not exhale valve, sorry, voice diaphragm is actually very good. I'd say this is better than some of the later American masks I've seen the voice diaphragms on. So you've got your exhale valve at the bottom, that's covered up by this kind of bit of rubber there. And then, let's try and get that back on, but it's quite hard to do where you've actually got the mask on. You can put outserts if you want to on the eyepieces. I've got some outserts in my bag, but they're just kind of the protective lens one, and I don't really see the point in putting them on so they can stay in the satchel. The filters are held in by friction with these clips, which isn't brilliant because when I was, you know, trying to stuff stuff in the mask, I think a big enough impact or vibration could maybe knock those off. That one's a lot tougher on that side than this one, so yeah, that one's, I think, how firm it should be. This is what happens when they get a bit old and maybe bent and then they don't stick on as well. But yeah, like I said, I can complain about cheek filter designs all day, I'll just give you a side profile on it. But the M17A2 at least is kind of everything works properly on it other than the fact that it's a cheek filter mask. So I guess this is the standard the M17 type cheek filter mask should be at. So now let's look at some more designs. Now for the Polish MP4 Bulldog, and this mask is probably the closest in my opinion to the actual M17s in terms of where everything is. If you look at the original M17, exact same exhale valve cover thing on there, made of rubber. Again, like the M17, it can be a bit awkward to get it back on once you've taken it off. Some people were a bit confused when I did my video on this because they said, where's the drinking tube? Apparently there's two versions of the MP4. There's this one, which is the more common one, no drinking tube. A rarer one that has a drinking tube, but this is the bulk standard common one. Weight wise, it's quite similar to the M17. I don't think it's really any lighter or heavier. The rubber's quite comfortable on this, to be honest. The strap system's very similar to the M17 as well. So if I just put this on briefly, right, the actual oral nasal cup in this mask isn't pinned back properly at the moment. So that'd be more comfortable if it was, so I'm not going to keep this on particularly long. There's your side profile of it. Really, it's just like the M17 in a lot of ways. I think the rubber might be a little bit heavier by volume on this, but saying that, the oral nasal cup was pinned back properly, it just tends to pinch on this mask. But regardless, the MP4 is fairly competent at what it is. It's very similar to the original M17s as far as I can tell as a clone goes. So, you know, it's pretty much equal in quality to an original M17, it's not really any better or worse. So you could do a lot worse than getting an MP4 Bulldog, I guess, at the time, if you wanted a good M17 clone. But there's nothing particularly special about it, really, you know, not much to say. If the M17 works, this works. Right, okay, now for the Czech copies. This is the Czech M10. And they've kind of done a new exhale valve assembly, which I quite like on this. The exhale valve is underneath sort of an actual kind of plasticky cover, and then you've got your voice diaphragm kind of in the same place. What I like about the Czech ones is that the cheek filters, rather than just having a popper that connects them like on the Polish one and the actual M17, they've got a screw on here, which in my opinion holds the filters in much better. You're not going to really worry about a screw falling out, but you know, you might worry about something held on by friction falling out. Now this one I can't really comfortably wear because the entire oral nasal cup on this mask doesn't seem to like to sit in place very well. So I'll show you the M10M on rather than this one, but otherwise they're pretty much the same mask, other than the M10M having a drinking tube. But yeah, you know, I got very angry when I did the videos trying to put the filters in this and that. That's not actually the fault of this mask, it's just cheek filter masks in general. The thing I really do like about these is, in my opinion, the Czech masks have the best straps out of a lot of them. Czech straps are always really good. They're kind of the standard elasticy 6-point head harness things. You know, they're comfortable to wear. You tend to be able to do them up and then undo them fairly easily, although I had my CM4 get stuck to my head at one point. But overall, these are fairly good. But as said, let's look at the M10M. And I will point out that this is my favourite gas mask satchel a lot as well. It's very bulky, but see, the actual M10 comes in this much cheaper-y kind of thin one. The M10M's in this very nice kind of fake leather one. I think people have said to me this is vinyl, but I can't really test that. But here we go. Here is the actual M10M. As you can see, pretty much the exact same mask, but this one has a drinking tube system on it. The drinking tube stores in this bit by default, and it's coiled around on a bit of the rubber, similar to an M17, but it doesn't kind of fit in quite as well on this. So anyway, let's get this mask on. Right, I'd say out of the lot, this is maybe the most comfortable of all of them, just simply because the Czech rubber is so good on these. If you ever check CM3 or CM4 and M10, you'll know what I mean by the rubber on these. They are brilliant. It's when you make gas mask rubber, you have the problem that some masks have rubber that's a bit too thick and rigid, so they're not that comfortable, and they don't make a great face seal because, you know, they're too rigid, so if your face doesn't quite contour to the line of the rubber, it's not brilliant. Some masks have the opposite problem, like the PMK and GP7, where the rubber is too soft and the mask bends too easily, especially if there's a filter on one side and it weighs the mask down. This is kind of the ideal, where it's soft enough to be comfortable and make a good facial fit, but it's also not going to cave in on itself at the slightest bit of pressure on the mask. So this is very good. I've also talked about this weird system before, where you could get one of these attached to both sides of the mask and then attach it to a self-contained breathing apparatus type thing. Very, very odd system. Apparently people have told me, so thanks to that, the people who are from the Czech Republic or maybe Slovakia, and they were basically explaining to me that the system was meant to be used if you had this mask on, you're in a tank or an armoured vehicle, you were driving it through a river, you could put that on for oxygen if you went underwater technically, and then, you know, when you came out and it dried on the other side, you'd be fine. So that's apparently what that was for. I guess it's, you know, kind of, we're too cheap to make our own new design for that, so we'll just give people a weird improvised system for the M10. But if it works, it's not stupid, it's just a bit of a weird way of doing it. So, as said, the drinking tube on this works with a kind of push-in, pull-out lever thing. The M17's one is better for that, where it's kind of a talking thing that, talk as in T-O-R-Q-U-E, not talk, T-A-L-K. But, you know, like a talking thing to push into your mouth that way. But yeah, as said, I really do like, there's the side profile of it, I really do like the M10M, despite what, you know, you might believe, or I said I've ranted about cheek filters. I don't like the cheek filter design, but in terms of actual build quality, this mask is fantastic. So hopefully that explains a bit of my thoughts on that regarding that. Right, now we head over to Bulgaria for the Bulgarian PDE-1, and this mask's a bit weird because it has this kind of assembly from the Czech M10, so that's a direct copy from the Czechoslovakian one. It also has the cheek filter bits from the Czechoslovakian one. I don't know if the same cheek filters fit in both masks. I've not tried it, and I don't have any inclination to try, because obviously if you know how difficult it is to pull out and put back in cheek filters, it's not worth it to see if the sizes match properly. The other odd thing though is it's got a 5-point head harness on this one, not a 6-point one. I don't know why, because it's the only M17 mask as far as I can tell it does. Now the oral nasal cup has closed again on this mask, so I'll put on very briefly and it'll be very uncomfortable. Right, that's as far as it can go in my face because it's actually pushing into my nose and pushing it away from my face. I said that's not a fault of the mask. If that was opened up, that would work properly. Now it's pinching my nose and it's giving me a really weird voice. So let's have a look from the side. There we go. Let's have a look from the front. Right, this has got the weirdest rubber of the lot. I'm going to take it off. It's got the weirdest rubber of the lot. It's not actually bad rubber, but it's very kind of firm rubber, and it has a weird smell to it. One of the things I do like is it's got the Peripheral Seal on the Bulgarian one, so that's very good. Not all of them have that. I should have gone over that as I did the video and I kind of forgot, but Peripheral Seals, sometimes I call them outer seals, they have a few different names they can go by. And that's a really good feature to have on masks. The masks that have that generally make a much better airtight seal to your face, even if your face isn't the exact shape of the mask. The Draeger M65 doesn't have a very good peripheral seal, that's why so many people can't get it to fit to their face. And it's, for example, if you compare the American M9 to the Finnish M61 clones, copies, whatever you want to call them of them, licensed copies as far as I'm aware, the Finnish M61s have a peripheral seal on them, at least from the second version onwards, because my second and third version have one, and that's a really good peripheral seal. So my M61s always fit me much better than my M9, you know, more direct copies and my original M9, simply because the peripheral seal keeps the mask to your face well. So the Bulgarian one is probably the heaviest of the lot, to be honest. As I was saying, the issue of cheek filter masks is when they developed the M17, it was meant to be a really lightweight gas mask and a very compact gas mask. Now, the size of cheek filter masks is pretty massive and they weigh a lot more than conventional canister masks, even with the filters on. I did do a comparison with that with the M9 before and this, but regardless, that is the Bulgarian PDE-1. I don't know if I can really say anything amazing about it other than the Bulgarians love to throw talc all over these masks for some reason. Just look at how talky those eyes pieces are. So yeah, what can I say about it? Not too much. This probably feels like the lowest quality M17 copy I'd probably say out of all of these. So again, it's not awful, but it's still got the cheek filter design, which isn't a redeeming feature. It does have that nice blued voice diaphragm though, like the PG1 had. But there you go. Right, now let's look at some of the more weirder cheek filter masks. Okay, the Soviet PBF. Now, this is probably one of the more interesting cheek filter masks. Firstly, because it's a bit lighter than the M17 type masks, because masks is Russian latex. And it's the Soviet one where they didn't directly copy an M17, which is why I quite like it. They came up with their own design. Now, I've said about this before, but funnily enough, if you look inside this mask, you'll notice there's an oral nasal cup in it. It's one of the very few Soviet masks that has an oral nasal cup in. And in terms of quality control, these masks are amazing for Soviet masks. The issue is really that I wish they put an oral nasal cup in some of their other respirators. What I'd have loved is if they'd have made one, I think I've already talked about this, but you know how in the Stalker games they have the kind of weird PBF mask, it's not a PBF, but has the 40mm filters on, not the cheeks. If they'd have made a mask like that, with the oral nasal cup inside, made from this lightweight material, with the optical things on the front, it would have been the best of the Soviet masks, no question about that. But they made it with cheek filters, so it's not. Anyway. As I said before, I have no idea if the filters are safe in this thing or not, because they're Soviet filters, but I'm going to wear it for the sake of the video. Right, so one of the things I like is the oral nasal cup is made from quite a flexy rubber. So that means when I'm wearing it, the oral nasal cup actually, even if it doesn't quite fit my face, is comfortable, because it kind of bends into my face rather than, you know, jutting into it. Right, I get an airtight seal. You can weirdly see when I breathe in the filters depress at the bottom. Maybe. There we go. So apparently you'll be able to tell the voice diaphragm works fairly well. This has the most restrictive field of view of all of these because your eyes don't sit really close to the eyepieces, but they are at least optical eyepieces, which means that, you know, you can see dead ahead, you can look for a rifle scope, you can look through binoculars. The weird thing as well is this doesn't use the M17 style pork chop filter, it uses like an oval disc called the EO19 filter. It also has a slightly membraney ear bit, so you can hear a bit better in it. But yeah, The PBF I really like, just because of the fact that, you know, they've kind of come up with their own design. What I think would have been really interesting during the Cold War is that rather than everybody just doing direct M17 clones or very close M17 clones, I think it would have been nice if every country in the Warsaw Pact kind of came up with their own design, a bit more like the Soviets did. Because I think, you know, that would be a lot more interesting if that had happened, to actually have them in the collection. But as it stands, it's like, here is a lot of slight variations on the M17. And there's this thing. Right, now to look at my favourite of the cheek filter masks. It's the XM28, which is like the most futuristic mask I own. Sadly, these things never saw mass production. I've talked about this quite a lot of times before, so I don't want to keep going on about it. But basically, when the M17 was in service, they quickly realised that the mask didn't fit what it was meant to do. You know, it was too heavy and bulky, because it was meant to be a lightweight, comfortable mask. So what they actually came up with was two prototypes. The XM27, which was a silicon M17, basically just an M17 made from see-through silicon. The issue was, although it cut the weight down, it didn't cut the weight down enough, and silicon is more vulnerable. And the other thing is the silicon XM28, which is like a new design, often called the Grasshopper. And the idea of the XM28 was basically, let's design a new mask to be as compact, you know, as slim as possible, so, you know, you don't have all the issues you have with the M17. So this is what they came up with, the XM28. Let me pop this on. This doesn't have a voice diaphragm as far as I'm aware, just the exhale valve at the bottom, two intakes of the filters at the sides. Now, this was never actually designed to see military use, although it did, because from what I can understand, this was, it says on the bag, for riot agents only, for use in riot control agents only, which means it works against CS gas and particulates, not necessarily against vapour. And part of the reason for that is silicone is very vulnerable to blister agents, which is why a lot of respirators don't necessarily use it. Like when my 3M half face mask is made from silicone, it's really comfortable, but if there was actual chemical weapon attack, that mask would degrade faster than the cheaper 3M ones that aren't as comfortable, because silicone isn't that great, you know, if there's chemical weapons around. But anyway, this is the XM28, let's pop it on. I need to undo the straps a bit first, and I would be very careful with this mask about undoing the straps first, because these are very valuable if you break them. People have asked me a few times in the comments how much I paid for this. It was about £100 in all honesty. This is going back a few years ago. There was a bid on one. I think my max bid was just over £100 and I won the bid at about £100. So this is the most I've ever spent on a single gas mask, by the way. The second would probably be the GSR, which I probably spent about £80 on. That was when they were first in British Army service. Right, okay, let's get him on. Right, okay, so this is the XM28 Grasshopper. I don't think I've quite got an airtight seal on that at the moment, but that's okay. I'm not really trying to get one at the moment for the video, but I do know that this does get an airtight seal if everything's all put together right. So this was developed in the late 1960s. It didn't really see much service. They did produce enough of these that some pilots had them in Vietnam, the tunnel snakes had them and things like that. Although it's really hard to breathe through mine, the reason being that the particulate filters inside must be totally clogged. And apparently that was an issue with these when they were sort of tested in the field. As much as it says for riot control agents only, and it would have worked well for that, because the cheek filters inside are designed to be really compact, they haven't got much surface area, like that much surface area. So if you times that by 2, but then imagine you're in like absolutely clouds of tear gas, those particulate filters are going to clog very quickly, and once they clog, because it's a cheek filter mask, you can't take them out without taking the mask off. So as I say, I'm sure it's obvious to many people why I prefer canisters, and I think canisters are a better idea. Obviously masks like the Scott GSR and Avon M50 are kind of a bit like pseudo cheek filter masks, because the filters are designed to kind of sit compact on the face, but they, you know, plug in from the outside, which is the way to go. Obviously the M50 is a good design, the GSR is like the cheapy kind of copy knockoff where the filters end up being far too bulky and heavy. But yeah, this is the MSA XM28 E4 technically, and yeah, it is a good mask for what it is. It's the most interesting of the cheek filter masks in my opinion, because this is kind of what the M17 was originally meant to be like, but it just failed at everything. And you can kind of see why the M17 in some way is better for military use as it is, and also not. So that's my video on all my cheek filter masks. As said, I don't think cheek filter masks are a good design. I know you can argue some points where they are better, like somebody was saying in the comments that it's good if you're in an armoured vehicle because the filter's not going to catch on things. That's fine, but that's why old tank crewman masks always had the filter on a hose either behind you or in front of you, so it wouldn't get in the way that way. So you can, you know, work around that with conventional things. But again, the main issue I think is the wishful thinking of, because America's so great, America's never going to be bogged down in a chemical weapon scenario where they're going to be exposed to gas for more than 6 hours, which obviously in an actual big hot war is probably not a good idea to hope you can relieve all your troops within a few hours of chemical weapons going off. There you go. That's my summary of the cheek filter masks and why I'm not a massive fan of them.